Hello, and welcome back to Sam's Tarot. And this is day 3 of the 31 Days of Tarot. The 31 Days of Tarot is a project that was put on by Ethany. You'll find a link to her channel below, and as well as the Facebook group Tarot Readers Academy on Facebook that she runs. And it's kind of an opportunity for the community to put forth some of their ideas and concepts based on prompts that she provides, just to kind of get to know each other and to get our own content out there, which I think is a really neat and important thing. So um, I started doing the channel the last couple months, 2019, and last few months actually. In the last couple months, hadn't done anything, but I did want to get more active here in 2020, and so I decided I was going to participate in this. So I'm taking the last few days between Christmas and New Year's of 2019 to go ahead and get things set up for January of 2020. So day 3 here is all about the top 5 oracles that we used in 2019. Now, oracles is something actually relatively new to me. I've never really been much for oracles. By now, if you watch any of my videos, you've kind of heard some of my story about how I've grown and started in tarot. And I think the only oracle deck I've ever used outside of tarot was way back in the early 90s, thing called the medicine animal cards. And I remember using those, but that was it. Hadn't touched them at all until late last year, late 2019. And just started to collect a few of them and use them for various purposes, and decided that to me, they serve a similar purpose as the tarot, as a psychoanalysis, but more with a more specific purpose in mind versus just kind of a free form, what's up today scenario. What do I need to concentrate on today? I think to me the oracle cards have a little bit more focus, and I'll go over that a little bit more as I share with you my top 5 of 2019, which again actually have been my top 5 that I've only used last few months. And honestly, I've only got a couple more oracles past this. One I was kind of disappointed in. That was the Dr. John Dee's oracle. Of course, if you know anything about Dr. John Dee, he was the one who came up with the Enochian magical system and language of the angels, etc. He did a lot more than that, but that's what he was most known for. So I was expecting a lot of stuff based off of some of his studies, and instead it's like a bunch of the old astrologers and mystics throughout history, and more of a kind of a biographical information source than an oracle. So nothing wrong with that. It's good information. It's presented as an oracle, and I found it to be more of a research and biographical information, which quite honestly I think would have been done better in a book versus cards, but that's just me. Anyway, I'm going on a side rant, so I apologize. So again, no particular order. The first one is the Angelarium Oracle of Emanations. And there's actually a second oracle deck. I think it's called the Oracle of Watchers Angelarium that I am trying to get my hands on. I'm not sure if it isn't, and I need to do more research into this, obviously. I'm not sure if it's just not out yet or if it's out and sold out. But it's a beautiful little deck. Let's see. I'm forgetting about exactly how many cards are in it. But it's based on angelic art forms and art. And some of them start off with things like here, which is more Kabbalistic in nature, and Tree of Life, such as Keter here. Keter. And then Chakma, Bina, etc. It goes through all 10 of the Seraphs. And then you get into some of the angels that you have probably heard of, such as, and most people have, like Gabriel. Raziel, Azrael, and etc. And then into some that obviously I don't know where they come from, but I like the fact they got little titles. So here's an example: Zachariel, the Angel of Memory, and Shaquille, the Angel of the Sky. Shatiel, the Angel of Silence. And this is some beautiful, beautiful artwork. A little on the darker side, and I don't have problems with darker imagery. I actually like darker imagery, um, but it's an aesthetic thing, not a personal vow or personal whatever system. So I find that this deck, when I'm not actually in the best of moods, is a nice deck just to kind of look and reflect on, or draw a card and reflect on that particular card and what that represents. So, like, a great example that just happened the other day is I got Malkuth, uh, which is the kingdom and the 10th seraph in the Tree of Life, which has everything to do really with um, our physical plane that we're in right now. And the lesson is, to concentrate on what's going on around you in this plane. It's a time not to necessarily worry about spiritual matters as much as it is practical matters. And in that particular case, that was a day I needed to focus on practical matters. So um, I found that actually very helpful. So I'm still getting to know this deck overall, and actually really intend on utilizing it more here in 2020. The next deck, let's go over here. Very, very beautiful, called the Mystical Shaman Oracle. And it comes in a nice box. By the way, most of these things I will end up doing a walkthrough at some point later on this year, I'm sure. And this one has a beautiful book that goes over each of the cards, black and white illustrations. And this one was written and illustrated by three names I'm just going to show on screen, because otherwise, if I say them out loud, I will butcher them. But this deck is based off of South American shamanism, from what I can tell, that uses symbology that is not just South American nature, but you see in Africa, in Europe, and Aboriginal Australia. Matter of fact, now that I even say that out loud, I think I remember reading somewhere that one of these people was actually a more expert in the Australian Aborigines. So it's kind of a world view of shamanism. There is some Native American, there is some Nordic imagery that is involved that you see. And this deck uses kind of typical shamanistic imagery from around the world to drive home its points and archetypes for people to focus on. And I find this to be a very earthy, spiritual deck. And so when more in a thoughtful and enchantment type headspace is when I tend to reach for this for a card of the day or a card of the week. It'd probably be really good for a card of the month, but I haven't used it as such yet. And I actually, of the various decks that I have, I actually look forward to doing the full walkthrough and review of this deck, because I find that the artwork, even the back of the cards, have such strong world imagery and knowledge that the spiral, that you see this type of stuff throughout the world, in our natural world, and in our cultures, various cultures, our various religious exposés, etc. So even though it is very shamanistic and again, I would say heavily influenced primarily by South American shamanism, but shamanism from around the world is definitely in play here, in my opinion. It is still a deck that incorporates imagery that no matter where you are in the world, I feel like you have a connection to it and can see that connection. And so that is the Mystical Shaman Oracle, and I definitely will be using this deck here later on this year as well. Oops, need to put that in the box and then put the box in. The packaging, by the way. Now, so one of my guilty secrets is I love solid marketing and solid packaging. So if you present something in a pretty enough way, I'm a sucker for it. And I have to admit that they did an outstanding job in that for this particular Oracle deck. And it's something I'll go more in detail when I do the full walkthrough eventually. Next up is a deck that I use for my own shadow work, and it's called Mausolea, the Oracle of Souls. Now this has a lot of dark imagery. There's no getting around it. Not as dark as another one that I'll be showing in a minute, but if you're not into darker imagery, then I would definitely stay away from this particular deck. But if you're okay with darker imagery and prefer darker imagery for shadow work, I really would have to suggest this one. And it is very, very interesting. So, I mean, even your more powerful, your more positive ones, such as this one, the Master of Inspiration, Understanding, Community, and Ingenuity. If you really take a really good look at it, it's kind of a darker image, you know? You have an obvious sorcerer there that he doesn't necessarily look like he's up to the best of intentions. But again, that doesn't mean that it's negative or evil. It's just darker. So, and I guess I need to confirm, quantify. When I talk about darker imagery, I'm not talking about negative or evil. I'm simply talking about if lightness is all good and feely, darkness is the stuff that kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, but still part of everyday life, part of who we are. Which is why I find this particular deck interesting for shadow work, because of that darker imagery. Here, matter of fact, is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to butcher the name like I always do. Ashikriel, Queen of Shadows, Wrath, Instability, and Suspicion. And there's no doubt what type of spirit that is. And that doesn't mean that she is evil or negative, just that she has that particular archetype in our life. And for whatever reason, if you draw that card, that's the time for that. Or maybe a better way of putting it, it's a warning from going there, you know? Because let's face it, how often are we mad and we want revenge or wrath over somebody? And we know it's not necessarily the right thing, but that doesn't change the fact that we have those feelings. How do you interact with those feelings? How do you move forward? Sometimes we don't move forward very well. Sometimes we move forward excellently. But sometimes it means kind of taking those type of emotions and suppressing them because we don't want to manifest them. Because we know when we manifest those things, sometimes bad things happen. And that goes back to what I'm trying to talk about now, that darker imagery for shadow work and stuff. It doesn't mean that it's evil or it's a bad manifestation, just that we need to at least be aware of it. Interesting backs of these cards with some various sigils and symbology. and that is the Mausolea, Oracle of Souls. I promise there's a really neat positive one that I'm going to end this video on. So that said, our fourth one is another one that I use for shadow work. And honestly, when I first looked at this deck, I realized a lot of this was more feminine in experience and spirituality. But masculine men can still pull from that energy and still see that energy, and that is the Dark Mirror Oracle cards. This one is kind of a shadow work confrontational one, because it really does show the stuff that we don't like to see in ourselves. And then sometimes it's those things that we find triumph over, like right off the bat, the triumph of lies. Another one is this one: is this me? And again, some of these are more feminine in nature, especially because of the symbology, but doesn't mean that us guys can't really get into it and see it too. How many times and no matter what, are people affected by addiction? And here's addicted. Here's one that everyone should be able to relate to: hiding from your true self. How often do we want to do this? Forgetting oneself. What's our manifestation? Why are we supposed to be here? Downcast pride. So this one, I think, and kind of been using it when I can remember. I'll be honest with that. Here's another card: fated to suffer. And these are feelings that we have and that we deal with. And I'm going to kind of put this more on me. Something that I do fight with is anxiety and sometimes depression. And so when I see these cards, calling the storm, they actually do mean something to me. I can actually recall feeling this way. Today for tomorrow. Anyway, where was I going with this? On those days that I'm having a bad day, I generally don't look at the cards. I don't want to bring that type of energy into this stuff. But I try to remember that this, I think, is what this deck is really good for, is when you're in those kind of darker headspaces, why? And confronting those. And that's where I see this deck really coming into play. I have not experimented too much with that yet, because again, usually when I'm in that headspace, I'm not thinking about cards. I'm not thinking about the stuff. But I remember when I got this deck, that's actually something I wanted to experiment with. So as that comes up later in 2020, I'll explore that more with you and see where it goes. I could be full of crap and be completely wrong in all this, and if that's the case, I will freely admit that. And if it does work out in that type of way I think it will, I'll be happy to share those experiences too, because that's part of, not in everyone's life perhaps, but definitely in mine. Sometimes those darker moments are part of our life and part of what we still struggle through and go through. And overall, I don't say that as a negative thing necessarily, because I like my life. I enjoy life. And even in those moments that anxiety's got me or depression's got me, for the most part, I'm usually I have that thirst for life, for adventure, for the next steps. So anyway, let's end on a better note though for the fifth one, which is the Spirit of Animals Oracle. And part of my dog that just growled. I have 5 dogs, by the way, who have been amazing. It seems like they hardly ever make any noise while I'm videotaping this, so which is awesome, because some of these dogs are hound mixes, so you can imagine the type of noise they can make. Now, I've done a video on Spirit of the Animals Oracle So I'll refer you to that. But the essence of all this is a lady named Jody Bergsma, and Jody Bergsma has a special place in my heart. Um, and I tell you a little bit more why in the thing, but my video on the things. But she was the first artist, and actually from an area that I grew up in, that inspired me on what art I liked and why. And I just discovered when I was looking into experimenting with Oracle decks that she had an Oracle deck. I've since come to find out that she has two Oracle decks, so I'll be getting her second one here, I'm sure, fairly early in 2020. But this was the first Oracle deck that I started collecting again with, and is just beautiful. A lot of animal, obviously, animal and nature imagery. She also does a little bit of fairies and stuff like that. Uh, so in those type of energies, I find to be a lot more uplifting, and like to utilize these for kind of like a monthly draw alongside the regular tarot, and that's how I use this particular deck. And that is it for day 3 of the 31 days of tarot. I will tell you now, I don't have all 31. There were some prompts that for one reason or another I wasn't feeling. But I want to say I think I have like about 17 videos for the month of January based off the 31 days. So I do participate in a lot of them. So I will see you at the next day. And thank you so much for joining me today. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, please do so. Make sure you hit that little bell icon so that you can get a notification when I do come up with something new. And I look forward to following your journey in the 31 Days of Tarot. So if you haven't been already, please make sure you don't just put the link in the Facebook group that you can. Please feel free to leave a comment here with a link to your own videos and your own channel. I'm not here as a competitive thing by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm here for part of the community, and part of that means sharing. So I look forward to seeing what you have to say, and please feel free to leave those links and opinions down in the comments below. Until then, have a great day, and we will see you next time.